Daniel Rook pulled his plain white service van into a loading zone 2 doors down. He killed the engine, leaving the key in the ignition. He checked the clipboard on the passenger seat. A printed work order. Inspection, 210 West 4th Street Suite 207. Security systems audit, 2 to 4 hour window. Access pre-authorized. He'd never seen the client. The request had come through a broker portal, clean and simple. His eyes went to the building facade. A mid-rise, pre-war construction, recently sandblasted. 3 external cameras, 1 over the main door, 2 covering the sidewalk. He noted the angle of each, calculating the dead zones. A 15-foot blind spot between a delivery alcove and a fire hydrant. He filed it away. He got out, wearing a dark polo and grey trousers, a leather tool bag slung over one shoulder. He looked like any other contractor on any other block. The main door was unlocked. He pushed it open. The lobby was cool and quiet. Marble floors, an empty security desk. A monitor on the desk showed 4 camera feeds, glowing softly. The chair was pushed back, a coffee mug half full beside the keyboard. Unattended, his eyes went to the ceiling. 2 camera domes. One had a steady red status LED. The other, over the elevator bank, was dark. No light at all. A malfunction or a dummy. He crossed to the digital visitor terminal mounted beside the elevators. The glass screen woke at his touch. He entered the contractor ID from his work order, CRS-8821, and watched the progress bar slide across. A badge slid from the slot with a soft mechanical click. Visitor, Systems Audit Access, Floors 2, 3. The process was seamless. Authority issued cleanly, without delay or question. He took the badge and felt the weight of it settle in his hand. The ease of the transaction stayed with him. The second anomaly. He took the badge, clipped it to his collar, and walked to the elevator. He entered alone. The interior was pristine, enclosed, hushed. A camera dome watched from the upper corner. He pressed 2. The selection registered, the doors sealed, and the elevator lifted into motion. The hum of the machinery filled the space, steady and close. Halfway up, a sound reached him from above, a faint, precise click from the ceiling panel. It cut through the steady machinery with surgical clarity, the signature of a mechanical switch, a relay engaging. He kept his gaze forward, his body positioned slightly off-center in the elevator's reflection. The doors opened on the second floor. The hallway stretched ahead of him, washed in cool light from recessed LED strips. As he stepped out of the elevator, sensors in the ceiling registered his movement. The lights responded in sequence, brightening ahead of him in a smooth, anticipatory wave. The illumination stayed with him, holding the corridor open from end to end. His passage remained fully lit. The third anomaly. Suite 207 waited at the far end. He swiped the keycard. A green light answered. The lock released with a muted thunk, precise and controlled. He pushed the door inward. Inside, the space rested in half-light. Grey daylight filtered through closed blinds, flattening the room into soft planes of shadow. The HVAC system carried on at a steady, regulated hum, cooling the air to a clinical calm. The environment was already active, already prepared. The fourth anomaly. The office space had been stripped. No company logos, no framed prints. The cubicles were gone, leaving only ghostly outlines on the carpet. In the back of the room, 4 black server racks stood in a row, their status lights blinking a silent, rhythmic code. 2 plain metal desks remained, both empty except for cabling. On one desk, a single flat-panel monitor was powered on. Daniel walked toward it, his steps quiet on the thin carpet. The screen displayed a grid of 9 live camera feeds. Feed 1, lobby. The empty security desk, the visitor terminal. Feed 2, elevator, the empty car, the dark camera dome. Feed 3, hall 2, the empty, fully lit corridor he'd just walked. Feed 4, Suite 207 entrance, the closed door from the outside. Feed 5, Suite 207 interior. A wide-angle view of the room. In the feed, he saw his own back, standing in front of the monitor. He stopped moving. He counted the feeds. He watched the timestamps in the corner of each tile. They were uniform, updating every second, except they weren't. He focused on the interior feed. The timestamp read 14:22:05. He took a slow breath. 14:22:06. The image of his back in the feed didn't change. At 14:22:08, it finally updated to show his current still posture, a 2-second lag. He stayed still at the console. The screen continued its quiet stream of data as his attention shifted upward, tracing the ceiling above the server racks. A ventilation grate sat between two panels. Along its lower edge, almost lost against the grey metal, ran a thin black fiber optic line, secured with narrow strips of tape. It fed inward, clean and deliberate, not part of the building's published infrastructure. A siphon threaded directly into the network's bloodstream. The blind spot resolved itself in his mind. It wasn't an absence of coverage, but a manipulation of time. The feed on the monitor lagged, subtle, controlled. What observers saw wasn't live. It was a version of events held back by 2 seconds. A vibration pulsed once from his pocket. He waited. Then he stepped a single pace to the left, easing out of the camera's wide-angle cone. On the monitor, his image stayed where it was. The delay stretched, elastic, reaching 3 seconds before correcting. He retrieved his phone. A message from an unlisted number filled the screen. Do not leave the room. He powered the device down, the display going dark under his thumb, and returned it to his pocket. Behind him, at the suite's entrance, there was a solid, final click. The magnetic lock on the door engaged. The dim interior lights flickered, then dropped to a lower, emergency-level glow. The server fans in the racks whirred up in unison, their pitch climbing to a steady, aggressive roar. On the monitor, the grid of feeds refreshed. The tile showing Suite 207 interior now displayed an empty room. His lagging image was gone. In its place, a new tile appeared, pulsing a soft red. Suite 207, containment mode active. Daniel Rook held his position in the monitored stillness. The room remained active, its systems cycling. Somewhere beyond the feed, his presence fell out of sync. For 2 seconds, he ceased to exist on their screen. Daniel tested the suite door. The handle rotated smoothly, meeting firm resistance before the panel settled back into place. A low, even hum traveled through the frame, constant and deliberate. Magnetic lock. He examined the hinge side. The casing was seamless, uninterrupted, no mechanical release. The seal was fully electronic. The room had closed around him. He brought his phone back online. The screen lit. Signal strength remained absent. The wireless list populated with a single entry. HZN-SYS-CORE. He selected it. A certificate request appeared. Device authentication required. Segmented access, controlled entry. He powered the phone down and returned his attention to the monitor wall. 9 camera tiles filled the display. The hallway feed showed an empty corridor. The elevator tile held a vacant car. The lobby view rested on an unattended desk. Each feed ran smoothly, repeating its calm. No motion, no variation. The system had resolved his presence. He no longer appeared in the live stream. He crossed into the back room, where 4 server racks stood in tight formation, their fans moving air with steady purpose. Handwritten labels were taped neatly to the frames. Visual processing node, audio capture node, pattern recognition, cache outbound relay. The architecture assembled itself in his mind. This was a collection point, an interception layer, a listening post embedded inside the building's skin. A wall-mounted control tablet flickered to life. It displayed a simple countdown. Containment cycle. 2200 remaining. A soft shutdown window before escalation. He didn't touch it. He looked for a main breaker panel, found it on the side wall. He pulled the lever down. Half the lights went out. The 4 server racks stayed lit, their status LEDs undisturbed. A redundant battery system. The door lock remained engaged. On the control tablet, the timer jumped. 2030. The system punished tampering. He heard footsteps outside the suite door. 2 muffled voices. Feed still shows empty. Temperature normal. Hold pattern. Wait for the cycle. The footsteps receded. The operators trusted the loop. A moment later, a different door at the far end of the inner corridor opened, a service entrance. A single technician walked in, eyes on a tablet in his hands, no weapon visible. Daniel was already out of the camera's main angle. He moved as the man passed, stepping silently behind him. He wrapped an arm around the man's neck, clamping hard over the carotid. He drove him forward into the wall, pinning him. The technician struggled for a few seconds, then went limp. Daniel lowered him to the floor. He used zip ties from his tool bag on the man's wrists and ankles, applied duct tape over his mouth. He took the man's keycard and phone. On the phone, he deleted the most recent message thread, a status update, then powered it down. He dragged the technician into the server room, out of sight. Daniel returned to the main room, positioning himself directly beneath the ceiling vent. He checked the monitor. The interior feed showed an empty room. His movement hadn't registered. He'd found the footprint of his invisibility. He memorized its boundaries. He moved to the outbound relay rack, opened its front panel. From his tool bag, he took a diagnostic USB drive and inserted it into a service port. It triggered a handshake probe. The system logs on a nearby screen flickered with a phantom data burst. Outbound network traffic spiked momentarily. On the control tablet, the timer froze at 1842. No external alert yet. He accessed the cached logs on the visual processing node. The file directory was a map of the city, video files tagged by street names, intersections, building addresses, remote cam hijack, traffic cam, 5th/main, private feed, Davis & Co. Law, Conniff Room 4, mobile cam breach, user 44782. This was a city-scale illegal surveillance grid. He looked up. In the ceiling tiles, he spotted the discrete perforated domes of a microphone array. The audio capture node was live. Voice print recognition software was running. Audio logs were tagged with names. Journalists, union organizers, defense contractors. One file was marked Active Suite 207. His own audio stream was being recorded. He needed to disrupt the system without triggering a full lockdown. He rerouted a secondary power cable from the visual node to the outbound relay, forcing both systems into a brownout. The monitor feeds stuttered, digital noise tearing through the images. For a fraction of a second, his own silhouette flickered back into the frame on the interior feed. An external alert tone chirped once, sharp and electronic. The control tablet timer resumed, dropping to 1410. He aborted the power manipulation. Too risky. He needed a more permanent fault. He opened the visual processing node again. From his bag, he took a small bottle of industrial-grade contact cleaner, highly conductive, corrosive to electronics. He poured it directly into the server's cooling vents. The server's internal temperature gauge spiked. A high-pitched whine built from within the rack. Internal alarms triggered silently on the system log. The monitor feed dissolved into rolling static, then went black. The control tablet timer jumped forward by 4 minutes. 10:06. A continuous low external alert tone began to pulse through hidden speakers. The hub's eyes were permanently blinded. An intercom speaker in the ceiling clicked on. A neutral, synthesized voice filled the room. Remain still. Compliance will preserve your employment record. Daniel didn't answer. He found the speaker wire along the ceiling conduit and cut it with his lineman's pliers. The control tablet flashed yellow. Manual override attempt detected. His eyes went to the HVAC duct routing diagram on the wall. He traced a line labeled Service Spine B, a vertical shaft that connected multiple floors. The mounting screws on the access panel were non-standard, recently replaced. Someone had modified this duct for cable routing, a physical breach route. The suite door exploded inward. 2 operators breached. The first entered in a low crouch, weapon up. The second covered from the hallway. Daniel was ready. He swung the fire extinguisher from the wall in a wide arc, connecting with the first man's face mask. The operator grunted, blinded. Daniel stepped in, drove his knee into the man's ribs, grabbed his wrist, and twisted. A sharp crack. The pistol clattered to the floor. The second operator fired from the doorway. The round grazed Daniel's upper arm, a line of fire across his bicep. Daniel retreated into the blind zone, dragging the disarmed, groaning operator with him as a shield. He kicked the suite door shut. It didn't lock, but he heaved a server rack in front of it, barricading it shut. On the control tablet, the timer dropped to 6 o'clock. The words flashed. External team inbound confirmed. Blood soaked through Daniel's sleeve. He tore the fabric away from the wound. It was a clean graze, bleeding steadily but not deeply. He used the strip of fabric to bind it tightly, the pressure sharp and clarifying. He powered down every non-essential device, plunging parts of the room into deeper darkness. He moved fully into the footprint of the camera's blind zone, his back to the wall. He could hear movement in the corridor beyond the barricaded door, muffled voices coordinating. The digital war was over. The hub was blind and bleeding data. Now came the physical exit, and the clock in his head read 6 minutes. The containment timer on the wall tablet read 5:45. Beyond the barricaded door, Daniel heard coordinated movement, 3 distinct sets of footsteps, a low exchange of hand signals he could almost feel through the wall. The external team was in position. The digital battle was over. The hub was blind. Now it was about physics. He turned his back on the monitors and moved to the modified HVAC panel. He unscrewed the 4 non-standard bolts with his multi-driver. Inside, taped along the duct, was the thick fiber optic cable he'd seen earlier, the data siphon. He took his insulated cable cutters and severed it cleanly. On the control tablet, a status flashed red. External relay offline. The timer froze at 5:12. He pulled himself into the duct, a tight, dusty rectangle of darkness. He reached back, pulled the panel into place from the inside. The world became a metal tomb, the only light from his pen flashlight clamped in his teeth. He crawled forward 10 feet, then dropped down a vertical service shaft. Service Spine B. He landed on a narrow catwalk 2 meters below, the impact jarring his wounded arm. A hot spike of pain shot from bicep to fingertips. He steadied himself against the cold wall, breathing through it, then moved along the catwalk toward a utility junction door. Behind him, the hatch he'd come through burst open. An operator dropped into the shaft, misjudging the distance. He landed with a sickening crunch and a choked scream. A second operator fired 3 suppressed rounds blindly into the duct opening from above. One round ricocheted off the metal with a shriek. Daniel dove behind a massive ventilation unit. Lethal pursuit was confirmed. He waited, listening. One set of cautious footsteps advanced along the catwalk. As the operator rounded the corner of the machinery, weapon leading, Daniel struck from the operator's blind side. He drove the man face first into the metal frame, wrapped an arm around his neck, and delivered a short, sharp elbow strike to the jaw. The man sagged. Daniel caught the slumping body, lowered it silently. He took the man's compact carbine, checked the magazine, half full, and kept it low against his leg. He moved to a wall-mounted power distribution box, its cover labeled with floor numbers. He found the line for floor 2, node power. Using a spare power inverter from his bag, he cross-wired it, creating a feedback loop. He triggered it. A shower of sparks erupted from the box. Upstairs, in Suite 207, the servers would have experienced a catastrophic surge. Permanent shutdown, data corruption guaranteed. The building-wide surveillance feeds would be dead. From his pocket, he took the confiscated technician's phone. He powered it on, navigated to the cached surveillance logs, and set up a delayed upload to 3 destinations: the city's cybercrime tip portal, the Federal Telecom Regulatory Complaint System, and a public encrypted inbox known to be used by investigative journalists. He set the send timer for 6 minutes. He powered the phone off and wedged it deep inside the junction box. He found the door to the utility stairwell, unlocked it with the technician's keycard, and slipped inside. He stripped off his bloodied maintenance jacket, leaving him in a plain grey undershirt. He smeared dust and hydraulic grease from a pipe onto his face and arms. He mussed his hair. He was no longer an auditor. He was a fleeing night worker. He opened the stairwell door onto the second-floor office corridor cautiously. The scene had changed. The building's genuine fire alarm was now blaring, a deeper, louder klaxon than the hub's electronic pulse. Lights flickered. A panicked automated voice echoed. "Electrical fault detected. Please evacuate." Office doors flew open. Confused employees streamed into the hall, heading for the stairs. Daniel merged into the crowd, keeping his injured arm tight to his body, his head down. On the 4th-floor landing, a man in a dark suit broke from the flow, moving against the current, the field team lead. Their eyes met. Recognition flashed in the lead's eyes. His hand went inside his jacket. Daniel didn't let him clear leather. He threw his pocket flashlight into the man's face. The lead flinched. Daniel closed the distance in 2 steps, drove his forehead into the bridge of the man's nose, heard the cartilage crunch. He grabbed the wrist holding the pistol, twisted, and yanked the weapon free. He shoved the stumbling man down the half-flight of concrete stairs and kept moving, disappearing into the next wave of evacuees. He didn't look back. He spilled out onto the sidewalk with the crowd. The cold night air was a shock. Fire trucks and police cars screamed to a halt, strobes painting the building in frantic blue and red. He walked 2 blocks without hurrying, turned into a service alley. He shed the greasy undershirt, pulled a dark hoodie from his backpack, and put it on. He dropped the carbine and the stolen pistol down a storm drain. The bleeding in his arm had slowed to a stubborn seep. 6 minutes after he'd set it, in a junction box in a service shaft, a phone powered up and executed its command. A compressed data package containing logs of illegal surveillance, camera hijacks, and voice print targets uploaded to 3 separate public systems. The invisible grid was now exposed to daylight. Daniel reached his van 3 blocks away. He sat in the driver's seat, wrapped his arm tighter with a fresh bandage from his kit, and started the engine. He checked the rearview mirror once. He did not watch the building. His personal phone, powered on for navigation, buzzed. A text from an unknown number. Containment failed. He deleted the message. He powered the phone off, removed the battery. He drove into the anonymous flow of late-night traffic. He parked in a 24-hour big-box store lot 3 miles away. He changed his license plates with practice speed from a set in a locked box. He disposed of the bloodied clothing in a construction dumpster. In a gas station restroom, he cleaned the graze wound with antiseptic wipes and applied a proper, sterile dressing. By morning, the story would belong to the city. Headlines would break with the discovery of a concealed surveillance hub and the opening of a federal inquiry. Names would circulate, diagrams would be drawn. The machinery that had operated in silence was exposed, its pathways severed, its reach collapsed into record and investigation. Daniel Rook returned to his van. The driver's seat took his weight. The ache in his arms surfaced fully now, followed by the dull fatigue in his shoulders and hands. His body registered the night's work with clinical honesty. Beneath it all, he sensed the aftertone of correction. a system that had drifted, faulted, and been forced back into alignment. He started the engine. The van idled. The city moved on. He drove east, leaving the city's glow in the rearview mirror before the first hint of sunrise touched the sky. The glass tower caught the morning sun and threw it back at the city, a monolith of money and silence. Ethan Cross stepped through the revolving door, a man built to be forgotten. 48, clean-shaven, hair the color of weathered concrete. He wore a navy windbreaker over a grey polo, charcoal trousers, boots that were practical, not tactical. The logo on his tablet case read, Cross Compliance and Safety Inspection. The lobby was a cathedral of quiet wealth. Marble floors, a wall of living moss, the soft hum of climate control. He approached the security desk. Ethan Cross, Fire Safety Audit, penthouse level. His voice was flat, a neutral instrument. The guard, young and bored, slid a digital pad across the granite. Sign here, visitor badge, elevator C, keycard activated. Ethan signed and let his gaze drift to the monitors behind the desk. 16 feeds filled the wall. Lobby views, the garage, service corridors. On feed 7, 2 men in tailored suits stood near the service elevators. They stayed in place, watching the screens as the footage cycled. Private security, too still, too focused on the system. He took the badge, turned. His gait was economical, his shoulders level despite the old familiar ache in the left one. A reminder from a different life that overhead reach wasn't a guarantee. Elevator C chimed. The doors slid shut and the world became a silent, ascending box. He watched the floor numbers climb, mentally mapping the shaft against the building schematics he'd reviewed last night. Stairwell access points, service panel locations, potential choke points. The penthouse foyer was a smaller, richer version of the lobby. A single door of reinforced dark wood. A man in a cheap suit fidgeted beside it. The facilities manager, according to the file. Mr. Cross? Yes. Thank you for coming on such short notice. It's the panic room, insurance renewal. Needs the certification stamp. The manager's eyes danced away, landing on his phone. He checked the screen, swiped it off. Understood. Lead the way. Actually, the manager said, swallowing. Procedure. You have to go in alone. Owner's privacy policy. I'll lock the main door behind me. For security while you work. Just use the panic room's intercom when you're done. He pushed the heavy door open. It's all set up for you. Please, be quick. The owner could be back early. The red flags were small but bright. No escort, no digital logs. Rush job. Ethan gave a single nod and stepped inside. The penthouse was largely empty. Floor-to-ceiling windows lined the outer wall, their automated shades drawn closed despite the daylight outside. A minimalist sofa sat opposite the windows. A leather suitcase lay open on a Barcelona chair, half-packed. Near a sleek waste bin, a small pile of torn paper rested on the floor, the edges uneven. The safe room door was concealed behind a panel of the same dark wood as the wall. It clicked open at his touch, swinging inward on silent, heavy hinges. Ethan stepped into a space the size of a generous walk-in closet. Ballistic-rated walls, smooth and cool. A bench, an emergency water supply, a first aid kit. His professional eye began its scan. Air filtration system, HEPA and carbon scrubbers. Status light, green, but the intake gauge, it was drawing from the external building supply, not recycling internal air. Odd for a sealed environment. Independent power supply, a solid-state battery bank. Readout showed it was already active, providing 20% of room power. Why was it running before a test? A secure communications panel was mounted beside the wall. A single red button sat beneath a glass cover labeled Police. He followed the wire conduit with his eyes. It ran away from the building's main telecom spine and continued into a separate line routed along the ceiling. Ventilation. Primary vent was standard. But in the rear corner, behind the water tank, a secondary duct, narrower. A bypass, leading directly into the building's service shaft, an undocumented feature. He was documenting the anomalies in his mind when the first signal came. A soft ding from somewhere in the penthouse, an elevator chime. His tablet, resting on the bench, blinked. The Wi-Fi icon went grey, then vanished. The LED lights in the ceiling flickered once, a heartbeat of instability. His phone buzzed in his pocket. It was a text from an unknown number. "Hold position. Do not exit." He looked up. The small, dome-shaped security camera in the corner of the safe room swiveled with a nearly imperceptible whir. It tilted down, centering on him. "Hold position. Do not exit." He looked up. The small, dome-shaped security camera in the corner of the safe room swiveled with a nearly imperceptible whir. It tilted down, centering on him. Then, with a solid, hydraulic thunk, the reinforced door slammed shut. The magnetic locks engaged like a vault seal. The ambient hum of external power cut off abruptly. The lights dimmed for a second before brightening again, now running on the internal battery. A soft amber, backup power active LED glowed on the wall. Silence. Then, from beyond the door, muffled through layers of steel and composite, low voices. The scuff of boots on penthouse flooring. A distinct metallic clack-clack, the sound of a breaching tool being assembled. Ethan remained motionless for 3 seconds, the situation settling into place. Then he moved. He did a swift, silent inventory. Water, 20-litre reserve. Vent, too small for egress, but a conduit. Fire suppression, wall-mounted CO2 canister. Toolkit, his own, on the bench. Power access panel, sealed, but standard screw heads. Asterisk. He was a man trapped in a box, and the box was part of someone else's machine. The comms panel hissed to life. A voice, digitally distorted, flat, and without region. "Inspection is complete. Remain inside. This will resolve itself." Ethan looked at the speaker grill. "You're not with the fire marshal." A pause. A different kind of silence, weighted with recalculation. Then, the voice again, a note of cold curiosity beneath the distortion. "You're not the intended occupant." The line went dead. Ethan turned to the environmental controls. The air filtration timer now displayed a red countdown. 90 minutes. Minutes of breathable air. The digital thermometer read 72 degrees Fahrenheit. As he watched, it ticked up to 73 degrees. A slow, deliberate bake. The battery readout on the wall flashed 72 minutes at current load. His tablet chimed again, a building-wide security alert pushed through before the blackout. Unauthorized access, stairwell B, service elevator, override, investigate. The alert tracked their progress through the building. Sections were being sealed. Ethan reached into his toolkit. He selected a multi-driver, flipped to a Torx bit. Without a glance at the camera, he stepped to the wall, unscrewed the camera's housing with 4 efficient turns, and disconnected its data cable. The little red light died. He turned to the main power access panel. 4 more screws. The panel came away, revealing a nest of color-coded wires and circuit boards. He began tracing them, his mind overlaying the schematic, looking for the fault line, the pressure point. From beyond the penthouse door, a new sound. A soft thump, followed by the distinct, sticky sound of plastic explosives being set. A shaped charge. They weren't just locking him in. They were preparing to breach the outer sanctum. They don't want the room breached, he thought, his fingers hovering over a primary power conduit. They want whoever's supposed to be in here dead and untraceable. I am a flaw in their process, a complication to be sanitized. A deep, concussive boom shook the penthouse. The safe room lights dipped violently. A fine mist of dust sifted down from the seam where wall met ceiling. The comms panel crackled, the distortion now laced with interstitial noise. Final warning, stay inside. Ethan took the fire axe from its mount beside the suppression canister. The weight registered as expected. He held it steady, his gaze lifting to the narrow vent shaft in the corner. His expression remained unchanged as the room's process continued, with him still inside it. The dust settled. The room went quiet. Ethan lowered the axe, his attention moving across the room, locating leverage. The amber backup light threw hard shadows. He moved to the environmental panel. The oxygen sensor, a small digital readout he hadn't noticed before, showed a steady decline. 18.9%, 18.8%. Normal atmosphere was 21%. They were locking him in. They were slowly turning the room into a vacuum bag. The heat was pressure, the oxygen drop was the kill. His tablet chimed. A system alert popped up, styled to look like a building-wide notice. Remain inside secure area. Emergency response en route. A pairing request flashed. Building safety diagnostic. Accept. Ethan held the power button until the screen went black. He pried off the case, removed the battery. He did the same to his phone. Passive signals died. He turned to the HVAC access panel. Behind it, the ductwork was pristine except for one addition. A sleek black module spliced into the main intake pipe. A small LED glowed green. An oxygen scavenger. Professional, deniable. From the comms panel, a calm, automated female voice. For your safety, remain in place. Assistance is coming. The oxygen readout hit 17.9%. The response to his non-compliance was a turned dial. He heard the footsteps then, directly outside the safe room door, muted, deliberate. A metallic clink, a drill bit being fitted. A low electric whir began, a diamond-tipped coring drill biting into reinforced composite. The sounds aligned with an installation process. Ethan looked up, the ceiling vent, the narrow, undocumented bypass shaft. It was a vulnerability they might have missed. He dragged the bench beneath it. His shoulder protested as he reached up with the flat end of the axe head, popping the grate loose. It fell with a clatter. The shaft beyond was a square of darkness, just wide enough for his shoulders. He slung his tool bag across his chest, shoved the fire axe handle first into the duct and hauled himself up. The metal was cool. He wriggled in, pushing the axe ahead of him. It was a tight, punishing crawl. After 10 feet, his flashlight beam illuminated a junction, and there, wired into the main building air supply, was the hardware, a thermal override unit. Next to it, the oxygen deprivation module, its LED now flashing amber, active cycle. The system was failing. The comms panel hissed below, a new voice, male, calm, devoid of any emotion. You are not the intended asset. Your compliance can still adjust the outcome. Cease movement. Ethan stopped crawling. In the cramped, dark duct, his voice was flat, carrying down into the room. You picked the wrong room. Silence. Then, from the room below, a heavy thud against the door. Then another. They were ramming it. The soft kill had failed. The hard entry had begun. He pushed forward, faster. The duct made a 90-degree turn toward the building's core. He could feel a vibration. The massive central air handlers. A service shaft. He scrambled toward a dim light ahead. Another grate. He slammed the axe head against it. Once, twice. The metal screws sheared. The grate gave way. He tumbled out, not into a room, but onto a narrow metal walkway in a vast, dark utility shaft. Conduits and pipes lined the walls. The air was hot, humming with machinery. He was in the building's thoracic cavity. A hatch in the walkway floor, 10 feet away, burst open. A head and shoulders appeared. A man in dark tactical gear, no insignia. He saw Ethan, his eyes widening for a split second before his hand came up, clutching an extendable baton. Ethan didn't hesitate. He kicked out, not at the man, but at the heavy hatch door, slamming it down on the operator's forearm. A grunt of pain. The baton clattered. Ethan dropped, landing on the hatch, pinning the arm. He drove his elbow into the side of the man's exposed neck. A choked gasp. The operator went limp. Ethan yanked the man's radio from his belt and a keycard from a chest pouch. In the earpiece, faint traffic. Thermal signature moved to shaft B, confirm contact. He dragged the unconscious operator onto the walkway, took his pistol, a suppressed Glock 19, and spare mag. He was a system obstacle, now neutralized. The radio crackled. A calm, emotionless voice. The field commander. Asset is mobile. All teams, converge on shaft B. Lethal force is authorized. Execute blackout. The lights in the service shaft died, plunging him into absolute blackness. Then emergency strips flickered to a dim red. The hunt was now official. Ethan moved down the walkway toward a door marked Telecom Hub 42. His shoulder burned. His breath came short. The sterile clock in his head was now the only one that mattered. Oxygen in room. Critical. Hunters. Converging. Exits. Sealed. He reached the door. The stolen keycard unlocked it with a soft click. The corridor beyond was clean, silent, and empty. At the far end, 50 yards away, was the elevator bank. His path. He took 2 steps out, a shape detached from an alcove to his left. A second operator, carbine raised. "Stop! Down on the—" Ethan was already moving backward through the telecom door. He yanked the fire extinguisher from the wall, pulled the pin, and sprayed a thick cloud of white chemical fog into the corridor. He had no time to waste. He turned and ran the other way down the red-lit utility walkway, the fog billowing behind him like a ghost. The radio on his belt hissed. The field commander's voice, a razor in the dark. "You have one chance. Surrender. The alternative is asphyxiation in the dark." Ethan stopped at a junction. He looked back at the chemical haze, then ahead into the deeper darkness of the shaft. The air was already thinner, hotter. He raised the stolen pistol, its weight a cold promise. The system had declared war. He was now its error code, moving blind into the heart of the machine. The red-lit corridor pulsed with the wail of a distant alarm. Ethan pressed his back against the cold steel of the telecom hub door, the stolen Glock a lead weight in his good hand. The suppressed shot from the operator in the corridor had been a punctuation mark. The hunt was now an open war. The fire suppression timer in his head blazed. T-0430. The kill cycle in the safe room was still active. Even if he escaped this floor, if that room ignited, the entire building would lock into a full-blown emergency purge. He'd be trapped in a burning hive. He swiped the stolen keycard. A red light blinked. Access denied. Tier 3. Clearance required. He dropped to a knee beside the door's relay panel, ignoring the throbbing in his shoulder. With his multi-driver, he popped the cover, exposing a nest of wires. He bypassed the electronic lock with a jumper clip from his tool belt, sending a manual override signal. The magnetic lock disengaged with a heavy clunk. He slid inside, into the hum and chill of the telecom hub. Rows of server racks stood like black monoliths, their LEDs blinking in silent patterns. The air smelled of ozone and dust. Voices echoed in the corridor outside, getting closer. A 2-man sweep. Ethan moved silently to a ladder, climbed into the ceiling space above the servers. The tiles were thin. He lay flat, breath held, as the hub door hissed open. 2 operators entered, moving in a practiced stack. Their suppressed carbines swept the room. "Clear left!" Moving right. They passed directly beneath him. The lead man's radio crackled. Hub status? Empty, proceeding to stairwell junction. As the second man passed, Ethan moved. He dropped, landing behind him, his left arm snaking around the man's neck in a tight blood choke. He used his body weight to pull him backward, cutting off sound and air. The man struggled, clawing at his arm, then went limp. Ethan lowered him silently to the floor. The lead operator turned at the soft rustle. "Mills?" Ethan was already on him. He drove the heel of his palm into the man's nose, a sharp, upward strike. Cartilage crunched. The operator gagged, stumbled back into a server rack. Ethan followed, a short, hard punch to the solar plexus. The man folded, gasping. A quick cable tie around his wrists, another around his ankles, a strip of duct tape over his mouth. He searched the second man, found an encrypted smartphone. The screen was locked, but a live app was running in the foreground. Blackframe HVAC control, active containment. A building schematic glowed, showing the safe room pulsing red. Submenus displayed: thermal ramp, active; O2 scrub, active; suppression, pre-cycle, armed, 0358. They were watching the assassination in real time. He plugged the phone into a hub terminal via USB, hoping for cached credentials. The system pinged. A login bypass, a terrible security flaw for a Black Ops cell, but a lifeline for him. He accessed the containment protocol menu. Manual override, yes or no. He selected yes. A progress bar filled slowly. Disabling thermal protocol, 40%. An alarm shrieked from the phone itself, a shrill, electronic warble. A notification flashed, override attempt detected, alerting field command. Outside, the corridor erupted with shouted commands. Hub! He's in the hub! Breach it! The progress bar crawled. 65%. A heavy thump hit the door. Then another. They were ramming it. Ethan stood, his breathing controlled but shallow. He dragged a heavy server rack in front of the door, wedging it against the handle. He yanked the emergency strobe light from the wall, ripped its wires free, and jury-rigged them to a metal conduit, creating a live, sparking trap near the door's opening arc. Override progress, 85%. A new sound, the sticky thwack of breaching putty being applied to the door's lock mechanism. He had to hold. 90%. The door exploded inward. A cloud of smoke and splinters filled the doorway. The first operator charged through, weapon up. Ethan was ready. He swung the fire extinguisher like a battering ram, the base connecting with the man's sternum. A sickening crunch. The operator crumpled, choking. A second man pushed through the smoke. Ethan pulled the extinguisher's pin and fired a full blast of white chemical foam into his face. The man screamed, blinded, clawing at his eyes. Ethan shoulder-charged him into a server rack. The man's head snapped back against the metal frame. He slid down, unconscious. Override, 98%. But he was no longer invisible. And in his pocket, a stolen drive hummed with secrets, a ghost of the system that had tried to erase him. The math was done. For now. Silence returned to the telecom hub. Cooling electronics hummed. Men groaned where they had fallen. Ethan stood at the center of it, his breathing steady. He took inventory. Left shoulder, a shallow gunshot graze, muscle damage, joint functional, blood seeped through fabric and fell to the tile at a steady rate. Ribs, bruised, pain on inhale. Left forearm, superficial slash. He dragged the heaviest unconscious body to the doorway and wedged it against the frame. The door held. He slid down beside a dead server rack and stripped off the soaked jacket. He widened the tear in his sleeve with his teeth and looped his belt high on the arm, cinching until the bleeding slowed. The room steadied, a sound behind the racks. A woman crouched low, shaking. He pushed the cleaner jacket toward her with his foot. Sit, he said. Breathe. She obeyed. The alarm tone shifted. An intercom voice announced security response and identification procedures. Ethan stood, retrieved the fallen pistol, cleared it, and set it aside. Footsteps, commands. The room filled with uniforms and light. He complied without resistance, answered questions with his name and credentials, said little else. His story remained procedural and complete. An EMT dressed the wound. He was wrapped in foil, issued paperwork, and released through a service exit as the building emptied itself. Outside, the night was cold and loud. Ethan reached his van and sat without moving. After a moment, he tightened the bandage, started the engine, and pulled into traffic. He dropped the crushed SIM fragments into an empty cup holder. The system had run its process. He had survived it. That would have to do. The Manifest Part 1. The chain-link gate rattled open and Elias Mercer guided his unmarked van into the pre-dawn gloom of the Port of Wilmington's Container Terminal D. The air was a damp cocktail of diesel, salt rot, and wet concrete. His headlights cut through the mist, illuminating endless rows of corrugated steel, a monochrome maze under sodium vapor lights. The digital clock on his dash read 5:47. He slowed at the guard booth, a plexiglass cube glowing with a single monitor's blue light. The guard inside, face shadowed by a hoodie, didn't look up until Elias tapped his laminated Port Authority badge against the glass. The man's eyes flicked to it, Auditor, Level 3, Restricted Access, then to a clipboard. He gave a bored nod, pressed a button. The gate finished its jerky opening arc. No log entry call, no vehicle ID check. Elias noted it. Terminal D was supposed to be a high-security, bonded zone. Anomaly 0. He drove forward, tires crunching on gravel. His eyes catalogued the yard. To his left, the skeletal gantries of ship-to-shore cranes stood silent against the lighter grey of the sky. To his right, the container stacks began, forming narrow canyons. And there, at Dock 7, he saw it. 2 Peterbilt 389 haulers, their chrome gleaming dully under the lights, engines idling, exhaust plumbing in the cold air. Their trailers were empty, positioned for loading. Too early. The first day shift longshoremen weren't due for another 23 minutes. Anomaly 1. He parked beside a corrugated steel office shed, its windows dark. He killed the engine. The silence was immediately filled by the distant rhythmic beep-beep-beep of a forklift backing up and the low, constant hum of refrigerated containers, reefers, keeping their cargo at a precise chill. The door of the shed opened, spilling yellow light. A young man in a fluorescent orange high-vis vest stepped out, yawning. A junior shipping clerk, according to the shift roster Elias had memorized. The kid's name tag read J. Parker. "You, Mercer?" Parker asked, his breath clouding. "Yes." Elias exited the van, retrieving a hard-shell clipboard and a ruggedized tablet from the passenger seat. He wore a navy water-resistant jacket, cargo trousers, and steel-toed boots. He looked the part. "Early bird," Parker said, accepting the audit authorization paperwork. He pulled a handheld terminal from his belt, scanned the barcode on Elias's ID badge. The device emitted a single, affirmative beep. Parker glanced at the screen, shrugged. "You're clear. Stacks in row 14. Manifests synced to your tablet. GPS should take you right to it." Elias took back his ID. The system had accepted Level 3 credentials with no supervisor ping, no secondary verification. For a bonded terminal handling high-value, sensitive cargo, that protocol lapse was a glaring fault. Anomaly 2. "Quiet this morning," Elias stated, a casual probe. Parker shoved his hands in his pockets, glanced toward the idling trucks at Dock 7. "Big push. Got a tight window on a career-bound shipment. Got to clear the stack before the day shift clutter hits." He nodded toward the container forest. "It's all yours. Supervisors around here somewhere if you need a sign-off." Elias gave a tight nod and turned toward the stacks. The container yard was a monument to globalized indifference. 40-foot boxes, some faded by sun and salt, others shiny and new, were stacked 4 high. His boots splashed through oily puddles reflecting the sickly orange lights. The air grew colder between the stacks, the wind channeled into a biting flow. He began his scan, walking the perimeter of row 14. His eyes tracked details, his mind cross-referencing them against 1,000 prior inspections. Reefer units, a dozen humming, their external condenser units vibrating, drawing power from the yard's grid. Status lights glowed green, normal. dry container, non-reefer, a standard blue 40-foot box, container number GSTU-478102. It, too, had a thick orange power cable snaking from a junction box to a retrofit port on its side. Why would a dry unit need sustained power? For lights, ventilation. Anomaly 3. Human element. A trio of longshoremen in heavy jackets operated a massive orange forklift. They were shifting a container from row 13. As they maneuvered, the driver deliberately gave row 14 a wide berth, angling his load away from the specific stack containing GSTU 478102. Not fear, habit, trained avoidance, anomaly 4. He stopped, pulled up the digital manifest on his tablet. The entry for GSTU 478102 glowed on the screen, listed cargo, medical polymers, temperature sensitive, category, reefer, refrigerated, weight 4,800 kilograms, destination, Busan, South Korea, clearance, priority, time sensitive. His finger hovered over the details. First, the category was wrong. The container's prefix, GSTU, was logged in the global registry as a standard dry freight unit. A major misclassification that any basic system check should have flagged. Second, the weight, 4,800 kilograms. An empty 40-foot container weighed about 3,800 kilograms. That left 1,000 kilograms of cargo. Medical polymers of the volume this container could hold would have a density yielding a weight closer to 15 to 20 metric tons. 1,000 kilograms was the weight of people, a dozen people, maybe 15, with minimal water. Anomaly 5. Mercer. Elias turned. A man in a pristine high-vis vest, clean-shaven and sharp-eyed, approached. His tag read, Riley, Supervisor. "That's me," Elias said, his voice neutral. Riley offered a tight, professional smile that didn't touch his eyes. "We're on a hard clock. That entire stack," he gestured to row 14, "is scheduled for the Morning Star, which has a tidal departure window in—" He checked a rugged watch. 27 minutes, lanes booked, miss the window, the penalties are astronomical. Your audit needs to respect that timeline. Pressure, applied politely, but with the steel of contractual obligation underneath. Elias nodded once. "Understood. I'll be expedient." "Appreciate it. The paperwork's already been cleared by upstream compliance," Riley said smoothly, anticipating the request. He held up his own tablet, showing a digital clearance stamp superimposed over the manifest for GSTU 478102. The stamp was from Global Surety Logistics, a third-party verifier. Elias leaned in slightly. The metadata in the corner of the stamp read, timestamp 6:15. His own watch read 5:52. The approval was post-dated by 23 minutes. A forged clearance. Anomaly 6. "I'll still need physical inspection access," Elias said, his tone flat, procedural. "Visual verification of cargo seals, interior condition, standard for a priority shipment." Riley's smile tightened. "Of course. But as you see, it's pre-cleared. The seals are intact and logged. A visual walk-around should satisfy protocol, given the time constraints. Opening it would break the bond, require a full recertification. We'd miss our window." A logical, operational objection. Elias held his gaze for a beat, then turned wordlessly toward container GSTU-478102. Up close, it was unremarkable. Slightly newer paint, fewer scratches. The heavy-duty lock on the doors was standard issue. He knocked on the steel wall with his knuckles. Thud. The sound was dead, muffled. Not the sharp, hollow ring of an empty metal box. This was the dull thud of insulation, spray foam, or lined padding. He placed his ear against the cold, vibrating metal. At first, just the hum of the external power unit. Then, beneath it, a sound, a faint, shifting rustle, a scrape. Then, unmistakably, a muffled cough, quickly stifled. Not mechanical, organic, human, anomaly 7. He straightened. In his peripheral vision, he saw the black dome of a security camera mounted on a light pole 20 yards away pivot with a soft whir. Its lens, like a single dark eye, was now centered on him. Near the entrance to row 13, a dock worker who had been coiling a hose stopped, turned, and stared directly at him, not moving. The surveillance was no longer passive. Anomaly 8. Elias walked calmly to the container control kiosk, a ruggedized touchscreen on a pole. He swiped his audit badge. The screen flashed red. Access denied. Container under active load protocol. All inspections suspended. Behind him, he heard the distinct chirp of a tablet receiving an alert. Riley's voice came, closer now, all pretense of warmth gone. "Inspection's done, Mercer. You should clear the yard." Elias took 2 deliberate steps back from the container, creating space. His mind was clear, a tactical map overlaying the physical space. He heard the deep, hydraulic grunt of the nearest Peterbilt's air brakes releasing. The truck's diesel engine roared to life. Simultaneously, the large forklift whined, its driver executing a sharp turn, its forks lowering and aligning perfectly with the steel frame of GSTU 478102. On Elias's tablet, clutched in his hand, a notification pinged. Greater than manifest update. Container GSTU-478102. Status loaded/finalized. Awaiting transport. A new bold countdown appeared, overlaying the manifest. Greater than departure window, 2140, remaining. The system sealed itself. The paperwork locked into place. The clock set the rhythm of everything that followed. Elias Mercer's position shifted. He was now inside a live trafficking pipeline, bound to its mechanics, with 21 minutes and 40 seconds before it cleared the port and dissolved into the shipping lanes. Part 2. 21 minutes and 40 seconds. The digital countdown on his tablet was the only clock that mattered. Elias moved away from the glaring supervisor, Riley, putting a stack of empty containers between them. He walked with purpose, as if heading to another audit point. His fingers moved across his tablet screen, navigating to a diagnostic backdoor. Using the metadata from the forged clearance stamp, the post-dated timestamp, and the vendor ID from Global Surety Logistics, he spoofed a secondary, urgent inspection request from a fictional port health official. The system, stressed by the tight departure window, pinged for verification, found the vendor credentials valid, and granted a 10-minute override window. He circled back to the container control kiosk. His badge swipe this time triggered a green light. Greater than manual access menu activated. 0957 remaining, a narrow digital window. He now had the system's tentative permission to touch the container. He walked directly toward container GSTU 478102. The orange forklift was idling beside it, the operator, a big man with a thick neck, watching him approach. The man shifted the machine, its massive tires crunching gravel, blocking Elias's path to the container doors. "It's sealed and loaded," the operator said, his voice a low rumble. "You're in the way." Elias held up his tablet, showing the green override authorization. Port health, possible biocontamination flag, immediate inspection required. The operator's eyes flicked from the screen to Elias's face, doubt clouding his features. He keyed the radio on his shoulder. "Riley, auditor's got a health override, wants to crack the seal." Across the yard, Elias saw Riley stiffen, look down at his own tablet, then back. The supervisor's reply crackled, tinny and tense. "Delay him, I'm coming." The operator nodded, a faint sheen of sweat on his temple. "Gotta wait for the boss, pal." Elias chose not to argue. Instead, his eyes tracked upward. 2 of the Black Dome cameras had pivoted, their lenses now fixed on this location. A third, 50 yards down the truck lane, swiveled to join them, a triangulated stare. His presence was now officially flagged. Digital escalation had reached its limit. He turned as if to walk away, then pivoted back, stepping inside the operator's personal space. Before the man could react, Elias drove his elbow deep into the man's solar plexus. The air left the operator's lungs in a pained whoosh. As he doubled over, Elias wrapped an arm around his neck from behind, applying precise pressure to the carotid arteries. The man struggled for 5 seconds, his hands clawing at Elias's sleeve, then went limp. Ethan dragged the unconscious bulk behind the adjacent container stack out of the line of sight of the cameras. He took the man's radio and the key from the forklift's ignition. He moved quickly back to the idling machine. He climbed into the cab, the familiar controls cool under his hands. He engaged the forks, slid them under the steel frame of container GSTU 478102. The hydraulics whined as he lifted the 40-ton box just 6 inches off its pad, enough to relieve the pressure on the locking bar. He released it. The container slammed down with a ground-shaking crash. The sound of fracturing metal was sharp and final. The electronic seal on the doors sparked and died. The heavy latch disengaged with a clunk. Elias jumped down, gripped the cold handle of the right-hand door, and pulled. It swung open a foot with a groan of stressed metal. The smell hit him first. Stale air, sweat, human waste, and the sharp, clinical tang of sedatives. Inside, in the gloom, shapes resolved. People, 8 of them. They were on thin mats, wrists and ankles zip-tied to anchored D-rings on the container floor. Their heads lolled. Most were unconscious or semi-conscious under chemical sedation. A small oxygen tank and a ventilator unit sat in the corner, its gauge dipping into the red. A child, a girl of maybe 10, was awake, her eyes wide with terror over a gag. She coughed, a weak, wet sound that echoed in the insulated space. Trafficking payload. Confirmed. His analytical, quick-thinking mind snapped into place, cold and absolute. He couldn't call the police and wait. The port's response would be bureaucratic, slow. By the time they untangled jurisdiction, the oxygen would be gone. These people would be dead, and the pipeline would have sealed behind them. He needed chaos, a system-wide fault. He ran to the power junction box serving row 14. He opened it, a rat's nest of color-coded cables. He identified the main feeder lines for the refrigerated container bank, 4 thick cables. Using the insulated cutters from his belt, he severed all 4 in one clean motion. The effect was immediate. The constant background hum of a dozen reefers ceased. Across 4 stacks, temperature alarms began to shriek, a rising, ear-piercing warble that cut through the dawn. On the docks, lights on the condenser units flashed from steady green to frantic red. Somewhere in the port operations center, a dozen fault alerts would be flooding the screens simultaneously. A temperature breach in bonded, temperature-sensitive cargo was a catastrophic event. It triggered an automatic quarantine protocol. No truck could legally leave the yard. The shipping lane was frozen. Seal breach confirmed. Security to Stack D, now, Riley's voice shouted from the radio Elias had taken. The tone was pure fury laced with panic. Elias climbed back into the forklift. He navigated to its terminal screen, a simple interface linked to the port's cargo management system. He pulled the full routing logs for GSTU 478102. He downloaded them, along with the cargo chain history. In 30 seconds, he had the digital trail. An upstream warehouse address in Newark, a Shell shipping company registered in Cyprus, a fake medical supplier front. The evidence was now a file on his tablet. A man rounded the corner of the container stack at a run. He held a police-style baton. He saw Elias in the forklift cab, hesitated for a split second. Elias was already moving. He dropped from the cab, meeting the man as he raised the baton. He caught the swinging wrist, twisted it inward and down, using the man's momentum. A sharp crack. The man cried out, the baton falling from nerveless fingers. Elias drove a knee into his stomach and shoved him face first into the container wall. The man slid down, unconscious. Quick, ugly, functional. He heard the shot before he felt it. A round from a pistol struck the gravel 2 feet to his left. Riley, 20 yards away, weapon held in a two-handed stance. The bullet fragmented on impact. A searing line of fire tore across Elias's left thigh just above the knee. He grunted, stumbling back against the forklift's tire. He looked down. A deep, bleeding furrow through his cargo trousers. Pain radiated up his leg, hot and insistent. He tore a long strip from his shirt tail, wrapped it tightly around his thigh above the wound, and tied it off. The pressure was brutal, but the bleeding slowed to a seep. His mobility was now compromised. The board had to be burned. Completely. Gritting his teeth against the pain, he climbed back into the forklift. He gunned the engine, its diesel roar drowning out the still screaming reefer alarms. He didn't aim for Riley. He aimed for the stack. He drove the forks into the side of the container stacked next to GSTU 478102. Metal shrieked. He lifted, pushed. The massive container teetered, then fell with a deafening, apocalyptic crash onto the main truck lane leading to Dock 7. He reversed, slammed into another, toppling it sideways, creating a jagged steel wall across the thoroughfare. The physical bottleneck was complete. No vehicle was getting in or out of this section of the yard. On his tablet, the manifest for Container 14 auto-updated, the system responding to the cascading alarms. Greater than status, quarantined, temperature breach/physical obstruction. The departure window voided itself, the countdown replaced with a flashing void symbol. In the distance, the first wall of official sirens began. The port's own security, drawn by the alarms and the unmistakable sound of crashing steel. Riley stared, his face a mask of pure, incandescent rage. He raised his pistol again, not aiming at Elias, but at the open container, at the people inside. "You blew it all!" he screamed. Elias moved. He dropped from the forklift, his injured leg buckling slightly, and positioned himself squarely in the open doorway of container GSTU-478102 between Riley's weapon and the sedated figures inside. The trafficking operation was blown. The timetable was ash. The system was in full, noisy collapse. But the final physical extraction had not yet begun. The sirens were coming, but Riley's pistol was here, now, and 2 more unmarked vans had just skidded to a halt at the sealed entrance to the yard. Part 3. The gunshot wound in his thigh was a white-hot brand. The sirens were a distant promise. Riley's pistol was a present threat. The 8 people in the container were a dying weight. Elias didn't hesitate. He turned his back on Riley and the advancing vans and stepped into the gloom of the open container. The air was thick and desperate. He moved quickly, checking each person. 2 were in serious distress, a woman and an older man, their breathing shallow, lips tinged blue. Hypoxia. The small oxygen tank was empty. He saw the oxygen masks and lines from the forklift's internal cab air system. He ripped them free, used his knife to cut the lines, and jury-rigged a connection to the container's own limited air supply port. It wasn't medical grade, but it was oxygen. It would have to do. He placed the masks over the 2 worst-off faces. Their chests rose more deeply. A 15-minute window, maybe. He stepped back out, grabbed the controls of the forklift. He angled its massive forks against the half-open container door, jamming it into place. It wouldn't stop a bullet, but it created a solid steel barrier a man would have to climb over. The victims were now partially concealed, their immediate access blocked. Rounds punched through the thin upper wall of the container, 2 feet above the huddled forms. Elias pulled the 2 conscious victims, the child and a young man, lower. A 3rd shot tore through the door, splintering metal and grazing Elias's right shoulder with a searing tug. He grunted, feeling the warm spread of blood down his back. He stayed low, raised his own pistol, and fired a single round into the gravel at Riley's feet. The shot kicked up dirt. Riley flinched, ducking back behind a container. A momentary pause. Elias moved. He exited the container, not through the blocked door, but through a small, hinged rear access hatch used for electrical lines. He slipped into the narrow gap between container stacks, a world of shadows and dripping condensation. He circled. One of the men from the newly arrived vans was moving along the next row over, a handgun held low, peering toward the chaos. Elias waited until the man passed his hiding spot, then stepped out behind him. His arm snaked around the man's neck, cutting off his air and voice. The man thrashed. Elias drove a knee into the back of his leg, buckling it, and swept his standing foot out. They fell together. Elias maintained the choke until the man went limp. He took the man's pistol, then, with a swift, brutal motion, stomped on the side of the man's ankle. A wet crunch. The man would not be pursuing anyone. Elias left him in the mud. Back at the forklift, he accessed the terminal again. The sirens were louder now, mingling with the still wailing temperature alarms. He uploaded the routing logs and the cached surveillance stills from the port cameras, including clear shots of Riley and the loading crew. He set the data to send to 3 destinations: the Port Authority's internal compliance server, the encrypted inbox of the Joint Maritime Crime Task Force, and a public customs whistleblower portal. He set a delayed public release trigger for 90 minutes. The network was now burned. Denial was impossible. He finished just as Riley found him. The supervisor came around the forklift, his face a mask of fury, his pistol rising. "You dead man!" Elias didn't let him finish the sentence. He threw a heavy steel locking bolt he'd grabbed from the ground. It wasn't meant to be a weapon, but it was hard and fast. It struck Riley in the forehead with a sickening thwack. Riley staggered, blinded by pain and blood. Elias closed the distance in 2 strides. He grabbed the wrist of Riley's gun hand, twisted it up and back. The pistol clattered to the ground. Elias drove his shoulder into Riley's chest, slamming him back against the corrugated steel of the container. He heard the distinct snap of a collarbone. Riley screamed. Elias used a length of heavy cargo strap from a nearby pallet, bound Riley's wrists to a container tie-off, and left him there, slumped and moaning, in plain view. Over the port's PA system, a robotic voice began to boom. "Security lockdown initiated. All personnel remain at your stations." The game had changed. The institution was arriving. Elias saw a group of 3 genuine longshoremen huddled by a shack, watching the chaos in terror. He walked toward them, his gait stiff from his leg, blood darkening his shoulder and thigh. He held his badge up, his voice a flat, commanding blade. "Port Authority Emergency Protocol, U3. Get those pallet jacks, now. Move those people out of that container and lay them flat on the asphalt. Cover them with those thermal blankets from the reefer unit. Do it now." His tone brooked no argument. The visible pistol in his other hand reinforced the point. The men scrambled. They worked quickly, using the hydraulic pallet jacks to gently lift the sedated victims from the container floor and transport them out into the open area near the access lane. They covered them with silvery emergency blankets. It was a crude field hospital, but it was visible and it was away from the line of fire. One of the traffickers, a driver, broke from cover and sprinted for the cab of the nearest Peterbilt. He was trying to run the blockade. Elias raised his pistol, aimed at the truck's grill, and fired twice. The engine coughed, died, and began spewing steam and oil. The driver threw the door open and fled on foot into the maze of containers. Elias let him go. He had one final piece to plant. He limped to the port's nearby control shed, a small, unlocked building with monitors showing camera feeds. Inside, he plugged a flash drive into a terminal, dumped the complete cargo chain records and his own annotated timeline onto it, and left the drive sticking out of the keyboard, a glaring red thumb drive in a grey room. He then shed his bloodied audit jacket, leaving it on the floor. From a hook by the door, He took a grimy, high-vis dockworker vest and pulled it on. He smeared his face and arms with grease from a canister, mussed his hair. He kept his legs stiff, his breathing controlled despite the pain. He walked out of the shed and merged into the stream of other dock workers, now being herded by arriving port security officers. He kept his head down, became part of the human current flowing toward the main gates for headcount. He passed through the chaos, flashing lights, shouted orders, the groans of the injured traffickers, the cluster of silver blankets where EMTs were now starting to work. He was a ghost in a high-vis vest. 3 blocks from the gate, he turned into a service alley. He dropped the 2 pistols down a storm drain. He tightened the makeshift bandage on his thigh, the pain now a deep, throbbing ache that threatened to buckle his knee. He breathed through it. He reached his van. He started the engine, the routine motion a small anchor. He drove 5 miles, parked behind a derelict warehouse, and changed his license plates. He stuffed his bloody clothes into a chemical waste bin. In the harsh fluorescence of a 24-hour gas station bathroom, he cleaned the graze on his shoulder and the deeper furrow on his thigh, applying sterile pads and wrapping them tight. His movements were slow, precise, devoid of emotion. On a cheap burner phone bought weeks ago, a news alert flashed. Breaking: major human trafficking ring busted at Wilmington Port. Multiple in custody, victims recovered. He deleted the alert. He powered the phone off, removed the battery. He drove east, the first hints of sunrise bleeding into the sky behind him. The port, the container, the silver blankets, the snapped collarbone, all receding in the mirror. The system had faltered. He had corrected it. The cost was tallied in blood and pain. The road ahead was empty. He drove into it. The morning light off the financial district's glass towers was a sharp, reflected glare. Daniel Mercer stood in the marble and steel lobby of the Ascension Tower, the air cool and filtered, smelling of lemon polish and quiet money. Executives moved in a smooth, tailored flow toward private elevators. Security desks, manned by men with earpieces and immaculate suits, scanned badges with a soft click. The atmosphere was one of controlled, frictionless power, a daytime system, precise and impersonal. Daniel wore clean, dark work trousers, a grey polo with a small embroidered HVAC contractor logo, and carried a hard-shell equipment case. He signed in at the contractor services kiosk, his fingerprints and retinal scan already in the system. A badge printed out: Mercer, Vent Tech, Tier 3 access, no escort required. He was cleared, a known variable in the building's maintenance ecosystem, part of the invisible workforce that kept the machine humming. He took the service elevator to the 42nd floor, the building operations level. The hum of the elevator was a low, familiar drone. The ops manager, a harried woman named Lynn, met him at a bank of monitoring screens that glowed with schematics and energy graphs. "Pressure imbalance in the executive gym wing, you said?" she asked, not looking up from a tablet. "And a persistent temperature irregularity in duct zone B," Daniel replied, his voice measured. "Your energy log shows a low-level draw after hours in that sector. Less than 50 watts. Not enough to trigger a building alarm, but it's consistent. Every night between 1 a.m. and 4 a.m. Lynn frowned, finally looking at him. "That's phantom load territory. Could be a faulty sensor. Could be, but the airflow readings from the last calibration don't match the schematic. There's a restriction. I need to inspect the duct." She waved a hand. "Fine. Calibrate. Don't interrupt anyone. The gym is supposed to be empty until 10. The partners have a training session then." "Understood." Daniel pulled up the building schematics on his own tablet as the elevator rose to the 44th floor. The executive gym occupied the northeast corner, a premium space with floor-to-ceiling windows. Its ventilation was a legacy system, oddly isolated from the main HVAC trunk, a retrofit from 2018. A footnote on the blueprint read, "Privacy isolation per client request, acoustic and air quality separation." Adjacent to it, separated by a reinforced concrete firewall, was a secure telecom hub for the private equity firm On 45. Teehee isolation made technical sense for noise, but it created a blind spot in the building's environmental monitoring. A pocket. The elevator doors opened onto a carpeted anteroom. The executive gym was through a set of frosted glass doors. It was a study in muted luxury. Slate floors, mirrored walls, precision machines of brushed steel and black leather. Soft ambient music played from hidden speakers. The air was still, cool, and smelled faintly of ozone and clean sweat. It was empty. He pushed through a heavy oak door into the locker room. The atmosphere shifted. It was warmer, humid from recent showers. Rows of rich walnut lockers with brass fittings lined the walls. The air held a layered scent: sandalwood soap, steam, the tang of antiseptic cleaner. A large, rectangular HVAC vent was set into the ceiling above the last locker in the far corner row. Daniel set his case on a teak bench, unclipped a handheld digital airflow meter, and pointed it at the vent grill. The digital display flickered, then settled. The reading was wrong. Air temperature should have been within half a degree of the ambient 68. It read 71.2. The airflow velocity was sluggish, the pressure differential off by 15%. He checked the schematic again. This vent was the primary return for the room, feeding into a dedicated shaft that went straight to a rooftop exchanger. No cross connections, no external thermal load should be possible. He took a small screwdriver from his kit, stepped onto a maintenance stool and unfastened the 4 screws holding the aluminum grill. It came away in his hands. Behind it, set into the sheet metal of the ductwork, was a black rectangular box about the size of a hardcover book. It was warm to the touch. A nest of fine-gauge wires, neatly loomed, connected it to the building's 24-volt power conduit. A micro antenna, no thicker than a pencil lead, was duct-taped to direct its signal up into the shaft. A bank of 4 SIM cards glinted in a slot on its side. A single green LED pulsed softly, rhythmically, like a slow, mechanical heartbeat. Daniel did not move for a full 10 seconds. His mind catalogued the object, dismissing possibilities with cold efficiency. This installation didn't match standard building systems. The equipment was concealed, powered, and live, with no vendor markings or compliance tags. It functioned as a covert relay, a live data node. He took out his phone and took 3 photographs: a wide shot for context, a close-up of the unit, a detailed macro of the SIM array. He cross-referenced the schematic on his tablet. This duct had no data lines, no logical reason for any hardware. Someone had built a shadow pathway, tapping building power, using the HVAC system as both a physical hide and a thermal sink. A locker door clanged shut in the next row, the sound echoing in the tiled space. Footsteps, bare feet on stone. Low, murmured conversation filtered from the gym outside the main door. His phone buzzed. A calendar alert slid onto the screen. Executive suite training session, moved up 30 minutes. Gym access now. He was inside a restricted privacy zone. He was holding illegal surveillance equipment. His badge had logged his entry at 8:47 a.m. He had no cover story that would explain the photos on his phone if he was searched. He moved with controlled speed. He reattached the vent grill loosely, leaving the hub concealed but powered. He packed his meter, stepped off the stool, and picked up his case, the latch clicking shut with definitive finality. A man in charcoal grey workout gear appeared at the end of the locker row, toweling his hair. He was in his 50s, fit, with the calm authority of wealth. He stopped, seeing Daniel. His eyes flicked from the tool case to Daniel's badge, then back to his face. "Maintenance," Daniel said, his voice flat, offering no further detail. The man gave a slow, non-committal nod, his gaze lingering on the tool case for a moment too long before he turned to his locker, his movements unhurried. Daniel walked out, his badge unlocking the door with a soft, electronic beep. The sound felt dangerously loud in the quiet corridor. In the sterile white service corridor, he leaned against the cool wall, his case at his feet. His heart was a steady, heavy drum against his ribs. He took a slow breath. He checked his phone. The battery icon showed 92%. As he watched, the number blinked and dropped to 84% in the span of a breath. A Bluetooth pairing request appeared on his screen, unbidden. Device, relay_node_07. Pair to transfer diagnostics. The name was clinical, operational. He thumbed, decline. The request vanished. The battery drained another percent, then stabilized at 83%. The hub was live and harvesting, actively scanning for nearby devices, drawing power to interrogate them. The behavior indicated an ongoing, automated operation, a data siphon embedded in the building's ventilation, feeding on the digital exhaust of the powerful. He turned and looked back down the long corridor toward the polished oak gym door. The morning sun streamed through a distant window at the hall's end, cutting the space into severe planes of light and shadow. The maintenance issue was gone. He was no longer a technician calibrating airflow. He was now inside a hostile system. The old postal annex was a cathedral of dust and stalled time. Daniel leaned against the cold steel of a storage unit door, his breath fogging in the chill air. The adrenaline was draining away, leaving behind a precise inventory of damage, a burning scrape on his shoulder, knuckles swollen and split, a deep, insistent throb in his right knee. He was a technician with broken tools. He took stock of what remained. His phone was a brick. His badge was compromised. But in his pocket, his work tablet, a rugged unit used for blueprints and diagnostics, still had charge. He powered it on, its glow harsh in the dimness. The photos were still there. Node 07's serial, the SIM array, the Ethernet line snaking into the wall. He opened a network diagnostic app. From this distance, he couldn't ping the device directly, but the building's public Wi-Fi was still in range. He saw its signal. More tellingly, he saw the random MAC address he'd noted earlier, still cycling through fake IDs every 2 seconds on the Bluetooth spectrum. Node 07 was live. The window was still open. Outside, the sound of sirens had coalesced into a constant, middle-distance wail. A police scanner app on his tablet, set to the financial district band, crackled with disjointed calls. Reports of a disturbance, Ascension Tower parking garage, possible assault. No description of him yet, just noise. He ran the outcomes, cold and logical. Reporting this now painted him as the suspect, a contractor caught where he shouldn't be, fighting security. They'd bury him in NDAs and legal holds. Running meant abandoning his life, his business, becoming a permanent fugitive. Destroying Node 07 would trigger an immediate silent alarm in the tech cell. They'd know exactly what happened and where. He needed a redirect, not to the police, but to an entity with the motive, shield, and leverage to turn a hidden node into a public problem. The recipient needed a pre-existing war with the powers Node 07 served. His mind sorted through the city's institutional conflicts. The answer was a function, not a person. The Metro Financial Review, a small, aggressive watchdog paper known for tearing into city contracts and regulatory corruption. Their office was 6 blocks away. They had a night drop slot for anonymous tips. First, decontamination. He factory reset his tablet, wiping it clean. He removed its SIM card and snapped it in half. The photos were already backed up to a cheap, anonymous cloud storage account he used for large blueprint files. He accessed it from the tablet one last time, downloaded the key images and a 1-page technical memo he composed in stark, factual language. Device: unauthorized surveillance relay. Location: Ascension Tower, 44th floor executive gym. Power source: building HVAC conduit. Probable function: data interception, credential harvesting. Serial: N7-2 3-881. He logged out and cleared the browser history. In a grimy restroom at a nearby bus terminal, he cleaned the blood from his jacket with paper towels and cold water. He swapped his torn polo for a plain grey sweatshirt from his van's emergency kit, left behind in his flight. He disposed of the polo in a dumpster 2 blocks away. His tool case was gone, lost in the garage. At a 24-hour copy shop, he used cash to print 3 copies of the memo and the clearest photos. He bought a cheap USB drive and loaded the files onto it. For a breadcrumb, he used a Metro Transit contractor pin from his van's visor, a meaningless token that would point a vague finger towards city infrastructure if found. The drop site was a narrow brick building on a side street. A brass mail slot was set into the door below a small plaque. Metro Financial Review, Night Tips. The street was quiet. A single security camera watched the door from across the street, its lens covered in grime. Daniel approached from the blind side of a delivery van. His knee buckled halfway, a sharp, white stab of pain. He stumbled, the envelope of photos slipping from his hand. It skittered across the wet pavement toward the gutter. He lunged, grabbed it, and pressed himself against the van's cold side panel. He waited, listening. No shouts, no footsteps. Gritting his teeth, he forced himself upright. He shuffled the final steps to the door, slid the envelope and the USB drive through the slot. He dropped the Metro Transit pin on the doorstep, making sure it landed face up. Then he turned and walked away, not looking back, his gait a stiff, controlled limp. 2 blocks over, his backup device, an old prepaid burner phone he kept in his van for emergencies, vibrated in his pocket. A text from another unknown number. Node 07 integrity check failed. Initiate retrieval protocol. It wasn't for him. It was system chatter, bleeding onto a frequency his cheap phone could pick up. The tech cell had pinged the node. They'd found it unresponsive to a specific command, perhaps the one that would have triggered the data dump for the upcoming operation. They knew something was wrong. They were coming to collect their hardware. The race was now public. The review had the evidence. Silo's field team was moving to erase it. Daniel changed his route, doubling back through a series of connected alleys. He entered a crowded, brightly lit convenience store, bought a bottle of water and a protein bar with cash, making eye contact with the clerk. The time on the receipt was 10:47 p.m. An alibi, thin but real. He dumped the burner phone, its battery removed, into a storm drain. The grey sweatshirt went into a different dumpster. He kept moving, a phantom in the city's circulatory system, until he reached his van, still parked in a paid lot a mile from the tower. It hadn't been towed. He drove to a self-storage unit he rented on the city's industrial fringe, a place for overflow tools and client archives. Inside, surrounded by silent boxes, he finally stopped. He powered on a small radio, tuning it to the local news station. He monitored the police scanner on his tablet. For now, there was only the usual nocturnal murmur of the city. No explosions, no headlines. He sat on an upturned crate, his knee screaming. The loop was sealed. He had taken a live wire from a hidden circuit and spliced it into a public alarm. The city's own corrosive chemistry, greed, ambition, institutional rivalry, would take it from here. He had redirected the pressure. The machine was awake now, aware of the disturbance. 72 hours later, Daniel sat at his kitchen table, the morning sun cutting a sharp rectangle across the scarred wood. His right knee was wrapped in a compression sleeve, the shoulder scrape bandaged neatly beneath his shirt. A small analog radio on the counter played the local news station at low volume, a background murmur of traffic and weather. His laptop was closed. He was waiting. The signal came at 7:18 a.m. The announcer's tone shifted from traffic updates to a flatter, more deliberate register. We have a developing story in the financial district this morning. Authorities have confirmed a suspected cybersecurity incident at the Ascension Tower earlier this week. Sources indicate an unauthorized electronic device was discovered within the building's infrastructure. The discovery has prompted an internal investigation and a temporary precautionary evacuation of several floors. Federal agencies have been notified. Daniel opened his eyes. He reached for a pen and wrote in the margin of a hospital ductwork schematic, *11/7-0718-signal confirmed. He felt no relief, only the validation of a diagnostic test. The redirect had reached the system. By noon, the second, more substantive signal arrived. He read it on his phone. The Metro Financial Review had published its story. The headline was blunt: "Covert surveillance node found in elite tower, links to security contract scrutinized." The article contained two of his photos, the node's serial plate, the SIM array, slightly blurred but technically clear. It quoted excerpts from the memo and raised sharp questions about the building's security vendor and its ties to a private equity firm already under regulatory scrutiny. The comment section was a battlefield of speculation and denial. The institutional machinery began its slow, grinding collision. By mid-afternoon, the district attorney's office announced a preliminary inquiry into potential breaches of privacy and corporate security. The mayor's office issued a terse statement about the paramount importance of integrity in our financial infrastructure. The owners of Ascension Tower suspended their contract with the security firm and announced a full, independent audit of all building systems. The covert node was now a documented anomaly in multiple official proceedings. The personal consequence arrived at 4:05 p.m. His office manager, Janine, called. Her voice was strained. "Daniel, the Ascension Tower management has formally requested you be removed from their approved vendor list. All our active and pending contracts there are suspended pending review." They cited contractual discretion. No specific reason given. "I understand," Daniel said, his voice neutral. "Was there an issue on site last week?" "No issue they can formally state. Thanks, Janine." He hung up. Within the hour, a voicemail arrived from the building's head of security, his tone carefully polite, requesting a routine follow-up conversation at Daniel's earliest convenience. A corresponding email copying the legal department appeared in his inbox. He ignored the call. He removed the SIM card from his phone, set it on the concrete floor of his workshop, and crushed it. That evening, as he reviewed pressure calculations for the hospital job, his laptop chimed softly. A new email. The sender address was a random string at a disposable mail service. The subject line was blank. The body contained a single, unadorned line. Interference logged. Operational continuity maintained. He deleted the email, wiped the temporary browser cache, and powered off his home router. He packed a small bag and spent the night at a budget motel 15 miles away, paying in cash. The threat was not erased. It was acknowledging him, a ghost pressure in the wires. The first institutional domino fell 48 hours later. A brief item in the business section reported the resignation of the senior vice president of the security contractor. The statement cited a desire to pursue other opportunities. No further detail was given. The following day, a separate and more substantial development. The Securities and Exchange Commission announced it was upgrading its existing inquiry into the linked private equity firm to a formal investigation, citing new evidence related to corporate governance and disclosure. The financial press made the connection to the Ascension Tower incident explicit. There were no dramatic arrests, no televised raids, just the slow procedural unraveling of deniability, the administrative cost of a secret becoming a documented fact. Daniel's assessment was cold and precise. Node 07 was burned. That specific cell of the operation was terminated. The wider silo network, its architecture and sponsors, remained intact, forced to recalculate and retreat. He had forced a reset, introducing uncertainty into the system. On a cool, clear Thursday morning, he drove to a hardware store in a different borough. He bought a new set of drill bits and a tube of epoxy. In the parking lot, he took his Ascension Tower access badge from his wallet. The laminated photo stared back, a man who hadn't yet seen the green pulse in the dark. He bent the plastic until it snapped along the seam and dropped the two halves into a municipal trash bin. Back in his home workshop, he opened his master job ledger. He drew a single, neat line through the entry for the Ascension Tower calibration. On the fresh line below, he wrote, St. Vincent's Hospital, Main Ductwork Survey, November 10th. The pressure shifted inside the system, and the machine settled into a quieter hum. He went back to work. The city did not thank him.